Welcome back to the Intentional Queen podcast, Journey to Restoration with your host, Janine, where you come women to be empowered, be your authentic self, and just go on your journey to self-love and healing. You guys, I am so glad to have you guys back this week. We've been doing so much on the podcast. And first, I just want to start out and say thank you for all the Instagram snapshots of listening to the podcast. I got so many, and some people even slid in my DM and email and just let me know how they have been inspired and empowered. And so that just lets me know that I'm walking out my purpose. So thank you guys. Continue to do that. And if you want to be shouted out on my Instagram, make sure that you guys snapshot listening to the podcast, tag me in it, and I'll pop it on my stories. But I just love knowing that you guys are listening and that you're being blessed by the message. It is May, so it is Mental Health Awareness Month. So you will notice that I've been talking about making sure you're checking in on your family members, make sure you're doing the work to make sure that your mental is good, because it's nothing like your mindset. It's so important. Summary of those past episodes. So let's do a few announcements. The last few things we've been talking about was vision. And, I've been putting about giraffe vision and making vision boards and trusting the process, pushing towards that. And that leads us into our episodes that we're getting ready to do for the next two shows, which is called She Believed She Could, So She Did It. I talked about in the past episodes, as I said, trust the process. And I talked about making sure that you're cultivating that space and getting around like-minded people and figuring out, girl, what it is that you want so you can go out and get it. Just keep doing that. Now we believe that we could do it. So now we're going to plan that we can do it. And then we're going to just do it. That's what that motto means when you listen to the quote, she believed she could, and so she did. I'm bringing on a special guest with me today. Her name is Whitney Morgan. I found her on Instagram. She ended up listening to my podcast and liking some of my posts. And I started looking at her stuff and realizing what she was doing over there. And I was like, girl, you have to come over here and speak to the queens. And little did I know, this boss mom, mamapreneur, single mom, who's also the founder of When Women Speak. That is a mentoring for youth program that she started on her own, but it started with her own journey to restoration. And then she decided that this is something that she wanted to do to give back, which has nothing to do with her boss degree that she already has. So all I'm saying is Intentional Queen podcast or Intentional Queen Journey is a community where I am bringing on women just like you and just like me, who's out there just making a difference. So I want you guys to definitely stay to the end. This episode is going to dig into healthy relationships because she digs into that, her business tips on how she even got started, how she had to do the work. And this is her first podcast, guys. So, she was being vulnerable. She was very nervous, but she came through and she was just her authentic self. So we just definitely cheering her on before we even start. Stay to the end, take notes, and share this with some queens that need to hear this. Please share it on. This is part 1. So without further ado, we're going to jump into it. But remember, there will be a part 2 in 2 weeks. So y'all make sure y'all come back. Hey guys, welcome back to the Intentional Queen podcast with your host, Janine, where you come to be empowered, where we're going to be peeling back those layers, where we're just going to be talking about self-love and self-respect. At this point, I think we've done a lot of episodes, but I had a special guest that I wanted to bring through today, and her name is Miss Whitney Morgan, and I'm so blessed to have this lady on the podcast with me. She's a single mom of an 8-year-old daughter. Her story is awesome. Her mentoring program is awesome. She's a mamapreneur. She's a boss mom like us. I just want her to come through. So without further ado, guys, I want you to go ahead and listen to her because we're going to talk about healthy relationships, mentoring, and we're going to talk about shifting your mindset. And I think that's so key for us as intentional queens. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce my girl, Whitney Morgan. Hey, Whitney, how you doing?
I'm doing good. I am doing amazing. I am so honored to be here with you and talking to you today.
I am so blessed to have you on this. I'm just going to say this. I kind of reached out to you on social media. You had like 1 or 2 of my posts and I just slid in your DM. I said, hey girl, I see what you're doing over there. And you want to come speak to my queens because I think you have something you could share. And you were like, hey, I'm for it. So here we are, finally doing the recording. I'm so excited. So first, I want you to give the queens a little bit of your background, your credentials, a little bit about your personal story. Talk to us.
So let me go a little bit back. So for those of you in the Midwest, I went to Indiana State University. I graduated in 2013 with my bachelor's in marketing and public relations. But while I was crossing the stage, I was belly full. I had my little one now, Alea, inside me. So, that was a proud moment of me being pregnant. Like I was full and pregnant when I crossed the stage and got my diploma.
Girl, you better clap for yourself. We too snapping for you because you can be out there pregnant and still get that degree. That's what you're showing. I was full term. Yeah, I feel you. Yep.
You can do it. You can really do it. And I got pregnant when I was 21 years old. And I remember when I got pregnant at that time, I was with my boyfriend and I was just thinking, okay, yes, things went a little bit off track than what I imagined, but we're going to be together in the end at the end of the day. So, I mean, what does it matter? But I also remember it being a struggle, to get through classes and to stay focused. And I even had a professor tell me, he was like, why don't you just take the semester off and then come back, when you're more there? Because it just seems like you just got a lot going on. So why don't you take the semester back? And I used that as fuel to push through, because I was like, no, we gonna get through this last, semester.
Right.
The relationship was very toxic. And
It get like that, girl, sometimes, toxic relationships. But you gotta know, I did a holding your peace episode called You Gotta Know When to Hold, When to Fold, and When to Let Go. Like, in your heart when it's time. And sometimes, like I say, hurt people. So you never really know what's going on behind the scenes. So I'm proud of you. That's good, girl. That's good.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. At the time, I feel like I had like masks over my eyes. I don't really know. Like I knew that what was happening in that relationship wasn't healthy, but I was determined to make my family work, right? I was like, this is going to be my family. A lot of people that I've known met their husbands in college or in high school and they made it work. So I can make this work.
We
And
be pushing ourselves too hard, because of the stigma. It's a stigma if your family's not together. I'm a single mom and, the stigma is there. Well, why didn't it work? Why you can't make it work, and then starting over. So I could feel you trying to push to make it work.
Right. And I grew up in both of my families. I grew up in a 2-parent home. I guess I didn't want to be that one to kind of like mess it up. I didn't want to be the one to like bring my daughter into this situation when I've seen that a 2-parent home can work and, be healthy. I was just like, let's push through. And it was, it was very, it was a lot. I just want to, just to say it was just a lot. And
listen, you high-fiving right now with the rest of the single moms. It's a challenge, right? And I came from a 2-parent household as well, but I also learned that, putting your kids, let's call it this way, putting your kids in an environment that is healthy, where they're going to flourish, that's ultimate.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? And sometimes that means you have to go into a co-parenting space, meaning you're not with the person, right? And so you might find a new person and they find a new person, and as long as the child is thriving, I stop looking at the stigma of I'm not with my child's father, right? It's not the original parents. Well, look at the adoptive parents, right? That's not the real parents, right? They didn't birth them, but they can love them and take care of them just the same, and the kids can flourish.
Right. And that's what I've picked on and that I learned later on. But while I was in that, I was still in this like very focused in mindset, right? I found out that he was moving on the day that he graduated. And when he said he was moving to a whole different state, it wasn't like, oh, okay, I'm moving in 2 months, or even I'm moving in 2 weeks. It's like, I'm moving in 2 days.
You had no time to process.
I didn't have any time to process. So of course I was upset and angry and mad. But then ultimately I decided to move myself and my daughter to where he was. And I think that's when I started to kind of see the bigger picture. I started to recognize like the mental abuse, because I thought that, if it's not physical at that time, like if he's not physically hitting me, then everything else you can work through, right?
See, sometimes people don't think that mental and emotional abuse exists, right? And
Right.
so sometimes, people try to gaslight you, right? Sometimes you might be around people with narcissistic behavior. Now, I'm not speaking on my personal life, but I'm just saying, like, I've heard it from so many women that sometimes you don't even know when you're in a situation, right? Because it's physically not happening, right? Like, you're not being hit or anything like that. So you stay,
Yeah.
not realizing that, like you said, you felt like some toxic situations was happening.
Yeah, yeah. What you're saying is absolutely point on. So I stayed. It got worse. And so people say, "Well, Whitney, what happened? Like what happened?" And a lot of that is still, tough to unfold, but just imagine you hearing somebody telling you words and doing actions, and then the next moment they're denying that to you and say, "Oh, I didn't do that." But you know in your right mind, I saw you, I heard you, but they're telling you, no, I didn't do that. So in my mind, it was like a mental battle of what was real and what was false. And I just kept, it just really was. And to a point where I was thinking, okay, am I the one who's,
You was starting to question yourself.
right? Because,
Yeah.
and so that really dug into it. But then, like I said, I have a little one. She was, born at that time and she was with us. And I said, I have to remove myself from the equation. And she can't be raised in this, right?
So you took the high road because you was putting your child first.
She can't be raised in this. Absolutely. And so I left like a thief in the night.
You
I got
skedaddled out of there. She said, I was out.
I got out of there. When I tell you, I put my plan together. I talked to my mom, who was back home in Indiana with my family. And I also talked to some really good friends who helped me kind of get a plan together. And we left because I said, yes, I'm enduring this because at this time I really love this man, but she doesn't deserve that. I have to leave this because I know this is not healthy. Those red little triggers were moving on. So I actually left. Literally, I think I might have said something around the lines like I'm going back home to see family. And then I just ended up just staying there. I
Because
just
you
never
had to do what
returned.
you had to do.
Yes. And I had to do it because, it just wasn't turning good there.
Well,
But
we're clapping for you right now because I can see your vulnerability is courage, and I'm clapping for you. It's hard to talk about sensitive topics. The question you have to ask yourself is, look at me now. Like, look how far you've come. Being vulnerable is hard. I talk about that all the time, on the
yes,
podcast with Brene Brown. And,
yes.
people going to judge you anyway. And I think for the month of April, I've made the podcast be spring into self-care, but I feel like self-care can also be emotional. And so
Absolutely.
you talking about now about emotional type things that you have to do. And so you did what you had to do for your own self-care, but ultimately for your daughter, right? Because you were
Mhm.
thinking about her future. It's even funnier because I told you earlier that I was working out and working on my self-care, but I
Yeah.
was working out and I was listening to my pastor, and today his message was on how you train up a child, right? And the
Mm.
environment that they're in, and that the kids are watching you and the kids are mimicking. So by you looking early when your child was small about how the environment can possibly affect them in a negative way, and you were trying to create a more peaceful environment, that's kudos to you because you're looking for your kids' future.
Yes, yes. Thank you. Absolutely. I mean, you when you kind of take yourself out of the equation, because that's what we like to do. You just think about the child that you have, and it's like they don't deserve that, and they pick up on every little thing that they see around them, and they mimic that. You
Listen,
know.
you have a little girl, I have a little boy. We both are Black African American women, and we know what we're seeing on the news. And so, right now, with the racism and all the stuff we're seeing, it doesn't even matter if you're a boy or a girl. And so, teaching our
Yeah.
children how to thrive in this new world we're in is
Right.
so key, but they are watching us.
Right, right. Absolutely. They are watching every single thing that we do.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it could be a lot, especially
Stressful,
when
right?
it's being your first child,
Me
and
too. Mm-hmm.
it's like every little thing that you do, you're under a microscope, they're watching you. I ended up moving back to Indiana, and I moved back home in my old bedroom that I grew up in, where I went to high
Started
school.
back over, yeah.
I
So
started back over it. I think I kind of beat myself up a bit. I was like, all my friends and people that I know are progressing, after college. And here I am moving back home into this bedroom with my daughter. Me and her are sharing this bedroom. I think it didn't dawn on me the effects of what had happened until I sat down with my dad and my mom. And they were just like, they could just see it. I went down to, I was like 107 pounds, in weight.
listen, stress will just take you on down, okay?
Yeah, I was very, very like tiny and just small, and I wasn't healthy, and all of that kind of, you could see when you looked at me on the outside. It was a lot to go from that and trying to figure out, okay, so where we move forward from here. In my mind, I thought that relationship with that man was going to be my happily ever after, right? Like
I
that we
had
would.
that. I had that, I don't talk much about it on the podcast, but I was married and now I am divorced and I'm a single mom. It's not what I wanted. I had planned out my whole life of I'm going to have a kid at this age. Well, first we're going to get married at this and we're going to have this and we're going to have the house and we're going to have that. And then when I had to like come out and say, oh, I'm divorced, it like crushed me because it wasn't what I
Yeah,
had planned for everything to be. But one thing, me and you both being women of God, is like God's gonna do what he gonna do. Like it don't
absolutely.
matter what you say, you gonna do. He gonna do what he gonna do. But you don't even know that maybe what happened, because this is where I'm in my own journey, right? Like that's why this podcast is called Journey to Restoration. I talk about the butterfly. I even got my butterfly earrings going, girl. And
Yeah.
listen, I had to bring it all together. Affirmations, girl, affirmations.
Yes.
Um, but I was bruised caterpillar in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
With that's the stages of a butterfly before you come falling out. And so when I'm listening to you talk, you talking about those bruised moments, because see, people will look at your website and see you flourishing now, but they didn't know that there was a broken side to you, a bruised side of you, the
Absolutely.
catalyst that got you popping, doing what you're doing, like if it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
for the people dying on me and my divorce, and there were some things that happened with my child, like if those things did not happen, those were my catalysts that got me to this podcast. Because girl, we talk about vulnerability. It was like, I'm not speaking, I don't know what you're talking about, God, people ain't gonna listen, God, I don't know. And every excuse I had in the world, he came through and just blew my mind. So one thing I'm working with is grace. So I want you to listen to that word
Absolutely.
and feel that in your spirit, is give yourself grace, because the woman that you were then, right? You were only doing for what you knew at the time. You did the best decisions for what you were at that time. Now you're in a different stage. So yes, maybe you would have handled it differently, but you only did what you could do in those moments. You know what I mean? So
Right.
not feeling guilty and giving yourself grace. And I struggled with that too, because you had a plan, right? You was like, I'm going to graduate.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to be together. I'm going to move where you moving. It's going to be good. We're going to be like everybody else, our friends. And then you come back home and you like, I'm starting over. I mean, when you're not with your child's father anymore, it is starting over. And whenever you find someone, right, they have to take you and your child now, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. Yes. I mean, what you're saying is all everything that, I want to say. And, like if you could talk to your past self, or I guess your younger self,
Mm-hmm.
that's what I would want to say to me at that time.
Come on now.
Because
Yes, yes. I'm like too snapping you, because that's why I have the Nia Swain on there the first time. I after my brother's episode, I have the Nia Swain. Her thing is the best way to heal up the woman is to talk to is to heal up the little girl. And so we
absolutely.
always got to go back. Something happened, right? And you got to heal her up so you could be that whole woman for your new situation and for being a good mom. You know what I mean? Your child is watching. you. You are the woman figure that she's going to know. And for my son, I am the first woman he's going to know before he goes and meets his wife, or his future, whatever. And so you want to make sure that you're showing them, right? Like showing them, the way, because my son saw me when I started losing weight and when I was stressed, he wiped my tears a couple times. You know what I mean? Okay. Listen, it was some days I didn't even want to get up. That boy came in, with his little sippy cup and was like, Mommy, I'm gonna go get you something to drink. And I already got my cup and my juice and I'm good. Like, you sleep, your kids know. And then when I become to be more happy and joyful, he like, oh yes, Mommy. So your kids can see that progression too. So just give yourself grace out there, girl. I'm just telling all the women out there in the streets, give yourself grace.
Yes,
because it's hard, but give it to yourself.
Absolutely. And just to continue on from that, I think that was like my first low moment in, I think, my life up until then. So this was a very dark place for me. And, I had to heal. I had to kind of confront what I just gone through. And I've had many women, my mom, my grandmother, even my dad and my sisters, help me through. And I had mentors as well, help me use my voice and speak on it, not in a place of shame or embarrassment, but to kind of say, this is where I was, but this is where I am, who I am today.
Empowering people from your story.
Absolutely. And so I told myself, I said, well, I want to create a program that I can give back what I've learned, to use my story to help other girls out there. And originally, I just wanted to target high school girls. But then as I've done more research and I connected with Indiana Youth Institute, and I had Yolanda Brown. She works with IYI here in Indiana, and she was just the women were telling me, no, you need to start earlier. And I was just like, okay. They're like, no, you don't understand. You got to get that message earlier. So that's when I started. I was like, we're going to start, at least with my program, we're starting at 4th grade to instill that message into these young girls. But
that's awesome. They got to start early, right? That's when the stage you start getting curious about things, right? That's when. Yeah. The pastor talked about that today, just talking about like waiting till they're teenagers too late. You got to show them early, and sometimes for our kids, our kids are a little bit younger right now, but your daughter's like right at that cusp. That's the time. Because once they get older, they ain't got time for what you're trying to say. That's when rebellion kicks in, right?
Absolutely.
So that's good.
Yes. Yeah. That was an eye opener for me. And then I did a lot of years doing research. I'm still in my mess, Janine, while I'm trying to do this mentor program. I'm still struggling with my own stuff. So it's not like, oh, I got it all together and I'm about to do something grand. Or it's like, I'm still working on healing myself. But as I'm healing, I just had a desire, and it was, from God that laid it on my heart to create something for, generations of girls to come up behind us. So I got connected with, I think their organization is mentor.org through IYI, Indiana Youth Institute, and you can apply for a grant if you want a mentor program. If you want to create any mentor program, not just for girls, but for anything, you can apply for a grant and technical assistance, and they will help kind of structure you so that you're not just something that pops up out of the blue, but that your program actually has structure so that it could be
back you up. They back you up for your launch. That's good.
So I did that, and it's been a lot of things where I've written up a lot of writing, and I had the woman that I was partnered with, she would tell me, and she would be like, okay, but we got to tweak. What about this? And what about that? So it was just a lot of different building blocks to get to the launch that we did.
I'm out here baby stepping too, girl. You speaking to me. I totally get you. The podcast is not 100. Okay. We be progressing, And truthfully, my therapist journey was like, you need to start a podcast. You need to find a way to give back. So, see, you're giving back through the mentoring program. And so the podcast was the same thing for me. So when I'm speaking life into people, like they speak it back to me. Like this is a healing thing. So like I'm not already 100 with my journey. You know what I mean? I listened back to my beginning episodes and I sounded so sad, like I listened back, but now I can hear my transition as I go through. I can hear the transitions in the quality of how I'm doing things, but I'm giving myself grace because it's baby steps along the way. You only can do what you know at that time. So when I started the podcast, I only had a few things that I knew. And as you're moving through your mentoring program, you're finding new people, you're expanding. So like, girl, you doing it.
Thank you. Thank you. I think we're doing it together. And I think that's the amazing thing of God's grace and how he has planted seeds in all of us, right? And we don't have to feel like we have to compete with one another, but we're all working together for like the greater good, And so I think that's the message that we want to get to women, is that we're all working together,
Come on now. And I love that. When we did our little interview, like we talked about that, like me and you were just talking about, why do women want to compete or compare each other? Like we all can level each other up. Like we're on the same playing field, we're all on different stages, meaning like, when we were really broken, and Lania Swain calls it bruised moments, not broken. When we were bruised, we were on a different playing field, right? But we were playing with what we were doing. And now we're progressing through the different stages of the butterfly. And so owning our role, but also giving back to the women who are maybe in a different stage than us, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, that's so important and necessary. There's work that goes behind the scenes before you see the final product, right? Before people saw Intentional Queens, there was work that went on behind that. And it was the same thing with me. Like, there was a lot of different steps, and I made it acknowledgeable with the state of Indiana, and I became official, in 2017. But I did not launch to the public until 2020 of last year, in December of 2020. So, it's a progression of things, it's not, it takes time, some people think that they have to just produce and pop out of nowhere and just, take your time.
Listen, I need you to say that one more time for the folks. Say it one more time for the folks, because that's good. Say it again, girl.
People feel like they have to produce and pop out of everywhere because they see everyone else pop it. But just take your time. Do what is laid on your heart, that God has laid on your heart, and believe in yourself and him that it will all come to the fullness. Like it will all happen in its right time.
Come on now, due season. Come on now. I think that's so good.
Yes, it will all happen. And so I think, I had to remind myself that, while I was doing it. And truth be told, it wasn't supposed to be virtual. I was going to launch in Indiana schools. And I had already met with a couple of charter schools here in Indiana to start the launch, but God had other plans,
And look at you now, because listen, with the virtual thing and with Corona, you was able to impact more because everybody was on Zoom.
Right. I said, you know what? This might be something, right? To be able to do it virtual. And by doing that, I met so many amazing women, and I met you.
Whoop, whoop. Yep. And listen, y'all, she already recruiting me, so I'm going to be over there too, helping out. So listen, I'm on the tri-state area. She over in Indiana. So, it shows that you can empower women and not even be in the same state. You know what I mean? We doing things from afar. So I love that. So we're going to skip on because, you already told us a little bit about the mentoring business, and then we're going to jump into like healthy relationships. Okay. So let's talk a little bit to that and how it translates to how you meet people and about boundaries. Cause I'm always talking about boundaries and triggers, girl. Boundaries and triggers is key around here.
Absolutely. So, oh my gosh. And this is from a personal experience for myself. Before you can have healthy relationships and set boundaries and all of that, I personally believe that it starts with yourself and shifting your mindset.
I love it.
You have to shift your mindset, because, and even rewinding with when you're shifting your mindset, you have to examine yourself in the mirror, and you got to get real personal, and you got to look at that woman that you see looking at yourself. And it's so easy to say, oh, she did that to me, he did that to me, they did that to me. But what have you done? What are the things that you did that contributed to that situation? And for me, that was hard, because I didn't want to own up to the things that I've done.
Your participation. We all
Yeah,
participate in some way,
you're
right?
participating in some way. Even by allowing this to happen, you can participate in a way. Let's say you're with a guy and you guys are dating, and that he's inconsistent, and that he's feeding you lies, and he's not doing what he says, but yet you still continue on with that relationship, because you want that to be something in the end. You're like,
You hoping
okay,
for it. You hoping for that.
you're holding on to hope. You're holding on to this hope. And so when you look into the mirror, you acknowledge all of those things that you refuse to acknowledge. And if you want to build healthy relationships in the future, I believe that you have to look in the mirror and acknowledge yourself. That's the first step, I would say.
So, I mean, you really like hit the nail on the head. When I talked about Meekness in the Storm, that was the first episode. And I talked about a book by T.D. Jakes called The Crushing. That's when God plants you. That's when he humbles you up. He says, okay, now you need to take the mask off. You need to figure out what your role was. So that's when I had my moment of what role did I play, right? Yes. No pointing fingers over there. You had to start pointing inward, because it starts within you. And I think that's so key. And then when you started talking about mindset, I had did this episode called As an Intentional Queen Thinketh. My brother had recommended the book a while back. It's by this guy named James Allen. And it's like a well-renowned book, but it's like old as dirt. It's like 1906. Okay. And so I was like, I got to Google this. This might be a hard read, but the skim notes of it is it talks about what you tell yourself and the seeds you tell yourself, and about positive mindset. So, I mean, when you talking about your mindset mean everything, I feel like you are definitely hitting on what the queen's been wanting to talk about. And you also talking about those hard places that we don't go. And as women, a lot of times we've learned to sweep it under the rug and just push through it. You ain't got to keep talking about just push through it, girl, to be all right. But what happens is you get in that next situation, and then it'll seep out in another way, right? Because you never dealt with it, right? So that's why I feel like when you talk about being planted in that crushing, that's so when you go into your next season of whatever's flourishing for you, you ain't taking that old thing. I say dust your shirt off of the offenses, because we be offended, the dust is there, and so you got to get it off your shoulder, like Jay-Z said, and keep it moving.
Absolutely. And I also believe that when I shifted my mindset, I had to ask God for forgiveness for the things that I've done. And that's a part of acknowledging, like, Lord, forgive me for the mistakes and the things that I participated in my past.
Which leads into grace. And so forgiveness and grace go hand in hand. Absolutely. And I had to do that too. So I love that. And I love that we're owning up to our role, right?
Yes. Yes. Absolutely, Janine, you're owning up to the role that you play. And that's not an easy thing to do.
It is not. It's a humbling thing. It's feelings hurt, right? That's when you really feel naked, right? That's when you feel bare, because everybody can see, when you've done that. I mean, God will shield you, because that's why it's called being planted. He deals with you in the dirt, right? When you put a seed into the ground, you put it into the dirt. Nobody sees all the transactions happening, but you just keep watering. And then at some point it's going to sprout up into flowers or whatever the plant is supposed to be. And so sometimes people have to go into those hard, dark places. Nobody wants to go into the dark, right? But when God meets you in the wilderness, y'all, okay, listen, y'all got to be talking like church. Like when God meets you out there in the wilderness, you like, listen, it's a little lonely out here. It's a little dark. I need some light.
Okay.
I need some light. But he'll send you people though. And I heard you talk about your root people, which was like your sisters, your mom, and your dad. And I had did an episode like on your queen tribe. It's so important when you're in those bruised moments is to know who is your tribe, right? Who is
Okay.
your roots, who is your
Yes.
branches, and who is your leaves, right? And we talk
Yes.
about the 4 seasons because you got spring, summer, and then you got fall and winter. And when you bruised up, you normally in the fall and the winter moments. The fall moment is when you realize you got to make some changes. The winter is when you out there naked, ain't no leaves, the branches look
Yes.
crazy, the tree look half dead. Okay,
Yes.
but it's not dead because them roots are down in there, right? And they keeping you alive until you get into your spring and summer moments. And so now I see you in your spring and summer, girl, getting it
Yes.
right.
Yes.
And we in
Absolutely.
spring now, so that's why I feel like that's so important, because people need to know the seasons will change, right? But it's like you got to embrace where you are in that season.
Oh my gosh, you are speaking. Absolutely. And like when you talked about choosing your tribe, like making sure that you're surrounded by friends that will tell you the truth about who you are. So, I have my best friend, she is very honest, and so she'll let me know. Like
And you need them people, right?
right, you need them, but you don't need a bunch of yes men, yes women around you. You're like,
Because they
yes.
correct you in a second, like, no, boo, it was you. Or no, boo, you ain't doing right. Right.
And you need that, because sometimes we need that check, like, and not at a place of, anger or, but just coming from a place of love. Like, I love you and I'm going to tell you when, you're
You ain't
wrong,
right. Right.
when you're
Yep.
not right. And so
Yep.
you definitely need those things. And that all aligns with, when you start to shift your mindset. I think for me, I was just determined to receive everything that God has for me.
Amen,
Right.
girl. Mm-hmm.
So, okay. So I listened to Megan Good and, her husband.
Mm-hmm.
Am I going to say his Javon Franklin?
It's
I don't
something
know.
like that.
It's
I know
something
his
like
last name
that.
is, I think is Devon. I wanted to say Devon Frank.
Devon,
Mm-hmm.
Devon Franklin. Okay. And so I remember he said that, God, do you want God's A plan, B plan, or C plan, or whatever? And so we all are going to have to speak to God one day, held accountable for the actions that we have done.
Yes.
Now, I shifted my mindset because I was like, you know what? I don't want to go in front of God and him tell me like, Whitney, I mean, you could have done these things, and all these things, but you were so limited that you only allowed yourself the bare minimum. Like you kept your mindset. You just stay right here in this small little circle, but you had all these things that you could have tapped into and you could have helped flourish and do while you were there on earth. And so in my mind, I had to shift to think, while I'm here living on earth, I am determined to receive everything that God has planned for me in my life.
Come on now, girl. Yes, I know about that. Mm-hmm.
So I mean, that to me is very huge in shifting your mindset. And then, when we talked about asking God forgiveness, so shifting your mindset to believe that you are forgiven, right? And not hold yourself to those past situations. I know for me, I felt like, there was like that little noise in my head, like, but you did that, but you used to do that.
Yes.
And it's like,
the
yes.
guilt. You feel the guilt, right? You feel the guilt, right?
You feel the guilt, but you know that you're forgiven. And if you're a believer and a Christian, you know that all things work to God's glory.
And once you already repented for your stuff, it's already forgiven. So we holding ourselves to a cross that's already been taken care of. You know what I mean?
It's already been taken care of.
It's done. And so a lot of that is the noise from the outside, right? The triggers that, or the people, who's your tribe, who's your triggers, where's the boundaries, right? I was just listening to this Instagram live yesterday. There was a lady speaking and she was just talking about, we create boundaries, but we don't create consequences for the boundaries because we wonder why people keep crossing back over the boundary, coming for us, right?
Yeah,
But
that's good.
did you create a consequence for that, and did you hold it to? And that's even for parenting. So when she talked about that, I was like, that's good too, because you want your children to know, because now we can make it be about children. Like, your children need to know that if they cross the boundary, it is a consequence, and you're gonna follow through with it. Don't give vital threats, and don't do it, because then they know they can keep doing it, right? And so then if you want to
Yes.
relate that to adults, it's the same thing. If you don't set hard boundaries, okay, and they can
Mm.
be flexible in a way, but the consequence needs to stand true, because they're going to keep coming for you. It's until they realize you're not playing that they
Oh my
stop.
goodness.
And sometimes
Girl.
stop playing is remove yourself. You know what I mean?
Yes,
Like, I ain't got
absolutely.
time. Like, you calling me, I put you on silent. Let me just slide you over, right? Unless it's an emergency, because you know what? Sometimes people will gaslight you, okay? And what I mean by that
Yes.
is they throw a whole kerosene on you, light you on fire, meaning they know you're going to respond. And so they
Mm-hmm.
want you to be upset. And so to
Mm-hmm.
get you upset, because now you put up a hard boundary, they're
Mm-hmm.
mad now. They want to
Mm-hmm.
slander your name now. Now they want to do
Mm-hmm.
all this stuff. So they know your reactions to those things, right? So
Mm-hmm.
a part of your cream tribe is also knowing who and what you're sharing with. Because when things
Absolutely.
hit the fan and people not happy with you no more, they
Mm.
quick to come for you. And
Oh
your goal
yeah.
is to make sure that you
Absolutely.
know, right? You know how to
Yeah.
respond when they coming.
Yeah. Absolutely. What you just said is just right key on. And setting those boundaries is very important. And even when we talk about relationships, right? And I'm talking about romantic relationships and dating right now. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, first shifting your mindset to believe that you are worthy of a certain type of relationship.
Come on now.
You keep accepting the bare minimum.
So, guys, that concludes part one with Miss Whitney Morgan. I am cheering her from the sidelines, because we just had such an authentic conversation, and we were just sharing how hard it is to come through some layers of some things. But being in your flourishing season is like where it's at. She discussed so much about how she started off being in college. She walked across that stage being a pregnant mom and still did her darn thing after coming through some relationship issues. But look at her now. She is out there flying free. I want to thank you guys for listening. I want you guys to email me at Intentional Queen Journey. It's at gmail.com. And you also can go to my Instagram at Intentional Queen Journey. Let me know what you're thinking, what you loved about this episode. Definitely make sure that you go over and slide over into When Women Speak. That is the name of her Instagram handle. I'll have all that stuff in the show notes. And you already know that my Instagram is at Intentional Queen. So make sure to follow us over there. We would love that. Snapshot listening to the Instagram and tag us in it. Rate and review the podcast, because I love when you do that. It makes the reach go further. And I'll see you guys in 2 weeks, where we go ahead and close out when she digs into some more stuff, y'all. So definitely thank you guys. And bye-bye. See you in 2 weeks.